Hello everyone, today we're going to be balancing a gimbal. I'm going to be showing you guys how. I have the 85mm 1.8 and the Canon 80D crop frame sensor. And the first thing I want to do before I do anything is actually attach these two and weigh them. Each gimbal has its own weight requirement and weight capacity. A lot of times people have hang-ups when they go to balance their setup because they don't know how much their setup weighs. And they go to put it on that gimbal and it either doesn't weigh enough or it is too heavy for the gimbal to work. All right, the next thing we're going to do is put our base plate on our camera. Now the base plate has some numbers on it like a ruler. It's just to help you remember where you put your base plate the last time you had it on there. And once we get it nice and snug, we're going to notice that there is an arrow. Now make sure it's nice and flush, but this arrow actually points to the lens and it tells us which way the lens is going to be out. All right, the next thing you want to do is make sure it's nice and tight. I just pulled out a Milwaukee screwdriver, not sponsored, and I just want to make sure it is nice and tight so when I get to use the gimbal that it's not moving around. All right, now we have 3 axes. We have 5 adjustments, but 3 axes. We have the tilt, roll, and yaw axis. So if you look at your manual, that's what they're probably going to be called. Now this is a first generation gimbal and it has this arm right here with this arrow. This arrow is telling you which way this arm should be pointed. You know, they have those arrows there to tell you that if it's pointing up, you're correct. If up looks correct. Each axis has an arm. We're going to be adjusting these arms and they all have those same numbers on them. Now this base plate tripod mount has an adjustment at the bottom like I told you and an adjustment on the side. These 2 adjustments are adjustments just for the camera. All right, now this one at the bottom here is supposed to adjust the width of the camera. So everybody's camera is different unless you have this exact same camera setup. And also the one on the side to the left there is just to tighten the base plate. All right, so as you can see, it's adjusting the width. And that's the distance of the camera from the side of the gimbal there. All right, and at the bottom of our gimbal, as you can see, is the included tripod foot. This will help you keep everything balanced and on the ground. You wanna make sure it's nice and tight and it's balanced on the ground with the thread of that screw right there. Now you can also put this on a regular tripod if you don't have a little tripod foot, but just know that your center of gravity is a lot further away and it's gonna be harder to keep it nice and steady. All right, a lot of times you're gonna have to hold your gimbal and make sure it doesn't sling your camera around. Another thing that you have to understand is that you have a pull-out screen here. Now, if you're gonna use your pull-out screen while you're filming, especially with this first generation gimbal where the back motor blocks the screen, you need to pull your screen out. You need to go ahead and pull it out before you put it on your gimbal so the weight distribution is correct, so you balance it correctly. Can't do it after the fact. It will throw off your balance of your gimbal. We're gonna start our first adjustment for our tripod mount. That's the width of the camera. This one I don't change as much. This actual screw adjustment, I don't change as much because once I get the camera on there, that's really all this screw adjustment does. All right, I'll need to clear the camera right close to the axis there. As you can see on the right side where my right hand is. All right. Now I'm going to use that other screw to tighten my tripod plate onto the actual unit. You're gonna make sure that you keep your finger on that camera at all times in a secure way so you know it's not gonna fall. Rely on the gimbal a little bit, but make sure your camera doesn't fall off the gimbal before you get it tightened down. You want to make sure both of those 2 adjustments are nice and tight. And once they're nice and tight, your camera is going to now lean based on the adjustments of the gimbal. Because usually you don't just put it on there and it's right. All right, so you want to make sure that your camera doesn't do too much flopping around because this can scratch the lens or the camera, and it's happened to me and it's not a fun feeling. All right, so there's an adjustment on the back, side, and bottom. Those are the 3 gimbal adjustments. You have the tilt, roll, and yaw axis. All right, now this axis right here seems to be actually pretty level. As you can see, it's not going down one way, it's really straight. Look at my hand. That's how this axis moves. Don't focus on the camera, just my hand right now. That's how this axis moves. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is the roll axis. And I'm going to just put it out and just put it out of balance for you guys, so you'll understand what it looks like when that axis is out of balance based on its job. All right, bang, look at it. Camera looks so weird. It doesn't look right. You would never want to film something like that in most cases. So what you're going to do is, like when you're at the doctor's office, you're going to use the weight and you're going to push it to one side, and when it looks level, you're going to push it to the other side. When it looks level, the better you get, the closer it gets to level, and when it's pretty much perfect, everything's going to be in like a perfect balance, and it's going to look that way. Look, I'm pushing it off to the opposite side. Since all the weight's going down to the right side, I'm pushing off to the left side. Bang. Now everything's going to the left side. I'm going to push it back to the right side just a little bit here. Up. I almost got it. All right, it's looking pretty level. Now you can see the lens pushing everything forward, or leaning everything forward. So the way we're going to handle this is we're actually going to go back to the tripod plate adjustment there. We're going to make sure our camera, we're going to hold it with our hands. What I'm doing right now is I'm just holding it with my hands. Now there's another adjustment here where my right hand is, and that adjusts the height of the camera. It does have some effect on the lens depending on the weight. If you have a lot of weight on the lens, this will make a big difference. Now we're going to go back to the tripod plate. This tripod plate is I'm pushing the camera back to balance the weight of the lens in the front. All right, now I'm going to the next axis, and I can push the axis up and down. And as you see, when I push that axis up and down, which raised the height of the camera, it pushed the lens forward. So now I'm using both of these to just kind of get a nice balance. The height of the camera and the position of the camera. I'm pushing the camera back on the tripod plate there. Bang. Now these two work in tandem, like I said, the one on my right hand and the tripod plate itself. And as you can see, it's pretty level. It looks pretty good. All right, now the tilt axis is the one that holds the height of the camera. Now you're going to point the lens all the way straight up, and if the camera leans forward or back, you're just going to adjust, forward, back, until it points straight up in the air. Now, after you do that, reset your camera back to pointing straight, and we're going to get to the yaw axis. Here's a top tip for balancing your gimbal. The closer you are to getting your axis leveled and right in the right spot, and the more you feel your camera staying in place, tighten your screws and keep them snug, even if you have to do a little bit of micro adjusting. Now, if they're too tight, of course, back them off, but don't back them off all the way out. Just back them off just a little bit so it'll keep your axis in place, because they can slide out on you. So the closer you get to balancing it, the tighter your screws get. All right, so the only other thing I want to do is go to the bottom and get my yaw axis. And this one is kind of hard to understand straight up because it's just a straight axis. But as you can see, this big arm right here goes to the left and right. So you want to make sure that you hold it in a way that your camera's not scraping up everything. And then you want to push it back and forth and back and forth. And you want to see exactly how the yaw actually moves. And then before we get started, we want to fire up the gimbal, but we want to do an auto tune. What this does is the system automatically kind of gets a weight on the gimbal, sees exactly how much weight or how much strength should be on each gimbal, and it fine tunes and gets everything right automatically for you. All right, and once you get your gimbal up and going, you need to do a nice swipe test, kind of, pan, tilt, and kind of roll your camera in the way you're going to use it. see if you see any shaking or anything like that, because any of that shaking will end up in your footage. So if it feels like it's shaking, like it's scared in your hand, then you need to readjust something and fine tune it. If you keep fine tuning it, maybe even going into the app and fine tuning it and feel like it's still shaking, then you might be past your weight requirements. And any other troubleshooting, you might have an issue with your gimbal, but I've not seen that in my uses of the gimbal for over about 3 years now. So now if you saw this video and it helped you out, give me a like, subscribe, support me by clicking on one of the affiliate links in the description below, and I'll see you in the next video.